Welcome to SportsBeat KC, presented by Big O Tires. It's Tuesday, December 10th, and we're on the road, specifically at the University of Missouri's new South End Zone facility, where Mizzou officially welcomed Eliah Drinkwitz as its 33rd coach before media, alumni, cheerleaders, and a pep band. There was plenty of pomp with the board of curators, the system president, school chancellor, and athletic director Jim Sterk having their say. But the day was about Drinkwitz, and the coach who had just made the most of his only year as a college head coach, guiding Appalachian State to a 12-1 record and the Sun Belt Conference Championship, was up to the task. Star columnists Vahe, Gregorian, and Sam Mellinger joined Mizzou beat writer Souichi Terada in Columbia, along with me, Blair Kerkhoff, to cover the event. We got together to talk about the hire, the process, and what Mizzou football might look like in the Drinkwitz era. You'll hear from us, but first, here are some sounds from the occasion. You'll hear from Sterk, Drinkwitz, and former Missouri coach Gary Pinkel, who spoke to the expectations of the program.
Last night, Deputy Chief of Staff for Governor Parson, Robert Nodell, stated that the governor is fine being the second most popular public figure in the state. Look out, Governor Parson. Here comes Coach Drinkwitz. I'm privileged to introduce the 33rd head coach of the Missouri Tigers, Coach Eliah Drinkwitz.
For me, this is an opportunity of a lifetime, and opportunities of a lifetime must be seized within the lifetime of an opportunity. And for this to occur, it took a lot of things to come together at the right time. But I know in my heart and in my soul and in my spirit, this is the right place for me and my family at the right time for Mizzou football. Coach Gary Pinkel, I believe he's here. Thank you for. You may not remember, but I was a high school football coach that came back here in 2009 with a young recruit. And you visited with me as a high school football coach and impressed upon me what it means to lead with integrity, what it means to lead the right way. And then you whipped my butt in 2013 when I was coaching at Arkansas State. But I thank you so much, and I appreciate your support, and I look forward to connecting with you and helping continue to put this program where we know it needs to be.
You believe the bar should be high for this?
Well, we back up a few years, right. Five double-digit wins plus in an 8-year period of time in my last 9 years, and we've done it, and did it in the Big 12 and did it in the SEC. Is it easy? No, but we've done it. That's where the bar is now. You can choose to have the bar down at 6 and 7 games. I don't want it down there, and I don't think Missouri fans don't want it down there. Let's go for it, and we know we can do it.
Eli, well, first of all, let's agree on the name before we start talking about the new Missouri football coach. Before we even say his last name, can we agree on his first name? What's he going to be called?
Well, he said it's Eliah, but my friends call me Eli. And then there was like this awkward pause, and then he turned around and said, "You guys can call me Eli."
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's verbatim. That's how I took it. But he said it in a kind of halting way. I kept trying to think through what's he really mean here. But I think we can call him Eli.
Yeah, I think Eli. I asked him directly.
Call him Eli,
Yeah.
but our listeners may not be as interested in this. But stylistically, for our typing purposes, we prefer Eliah as our first reference.
Okay, well, so we're going to go with that, right?
Yeah, so that's where it is now.
Okay.
I think it's reassuring to them that we think through this stuff that much.
Well, 2 extra characters.
Right. So anyway, you're hearing Sam Mellinger, Vahe Gregorian, Souichi Terada, and me, Blair Kerkhoff. We were all in Columbia to watch Eliah Drinkwitz's introductory press conference. New Missouri football coach, number 33, I believe I heard Mike Kelly say. 33rd football coach replacing Barry Odom, who was fired about 9 days ago, and what ensued was a search for the new coach, and it took a couple of twists and turns, as Souichi is going to tell us here in a moment. But let's talk about the press conference itself. The question we always ask ourselves is, how did he win it? Did Eliah Drinkwitz win the press conference? I thought he had a good day. What do you guys think?
I did too. I actually wrote this line in the column that I wrote today. Like, if you're not capable of winning a press conference, you're probably never going to get a job that gets a press conference. But that said, I thought he presented himself, like a coach's magic trick. Part of it is coming across super confident because you're in charge of a big multi-million-dollar thing, but you also need to be humble enough to get some buy-in from people who are already here on the ground and have had more invested in that than you have. And I thought he pulled that off terrifically.
I agree. I thought that you can look back at some little cues here and there of how he did that, but sort of the sweeping message was, I need you, but I also know what I'm doing. I mean, he actually used that term.
That's well put.
Which was kind of an interesting moment, right? He was being asked about, it sort of came out of the question being asked, essentially what makes him ready to think he can coach in the SEC, and he reminded us that he already had, albeit as a different tier of authority. But then he got into his relationship with Gus, and I think he said Gus knows what he's doing, and so do I.
I think he had a lot of quips, and he had some like almost prepared answers for questions that he anticipated. It's not like he had to think about them. He really had like when someone asked him about being a college coach for the first time. It's the easiest thing in the world. He was the offensive quality control coach for Auburn that went 14-0 and won the national championship. This stuff is easy. So that was a nice answer, and he had a few like that. Just some funny answers.
One of the quick aside to that point, because it riffs right off what you're saying. It did seem that it came easily to him in what he was saying, but also it seemed that he understood his audience a little bit. He knew to say Missouri and Missouri and from Mizzou. He knew to sort of talk about things that are a little bit of, I think burrs in people's saddles here, right? I think he kissed on discipline and special teams. A special teams thing, I think we were all struck by, of all things, his special teams answer, how thorough he's going to be about that, how much he cares about it. But I think he had studied the terrain enough to know his audience.
Yep. All right, Souichi, so you covered this thing from the moment that as you were driving back from Arkansas that Saturday morning, and Barry Odom got the word, and soon afterwards you got the word that Barry Odom had been fired. Take us through the search process and what you learned about it. Today, always at a press conference like this, there were some revelations about how the search went and who met who, when, that sort of thing. What did you find out today?
Yeah, I think the first thing and the main thing that I would take away from the coaching search is that this pretty much all went down starting Saturday, right? I mean, Jim Sterk mentioned it. Eli mentioned it, as they're calling him Eli. They mentioned that this all went down in the hours after the Sun Belt Conference Championship, meaning that what was kind of the first week for, I think, and obviously we saw what happened. Sterk had a list, curators, all those details we've reported on, but that's the biggest thing I'm taking away from it, was that it went by so quickly, even though it took 8 days. But realistically, this all happened within like a 24, 48-hour window. So that was kind of interesting.
I mean, you're right. I mean, it was really I think one of the things we learned today is that Eli did not become a move to the front of the list or was even part of the list until late in the process. I don't know what that says about the process, but let me before we address that, let me impart a little local knowledge here. They met at the Hampton Inn in North Wilkesboro, North Carolina, on Saturday night. I've been to that Hampton Inn in North Wilkesboro. It's a relatively new one, but I've been there, and it's about 45 minutes from Boone, where Appalachian State is, down Highway 220.
And why do you know this, Blair?
I do know this because I've made that drive many times as a student of Appalachian State.
Oh, look at that.
Even a graduate. I wasn't just a student. I've done graduated from that university.
Yeah, I do think we take that for granted sometimes.
So,
Look, I know enough about Blair to know that where he went to school, but I've always known to pronounce it Appalachian State ever since Blair had a little run-in with Danny Nee, former Nebraska basketball coach Danny Nee, calling it Appalachian.
Yes.
And Blair gently corrected him.
Yeah.
But I digress. Sorry. It's
So, but don't you guys? Isn't that what you kind of find out today? That it kind of came together late in the process.
If we got today was to be taken at face value, which I basically believe it was, there was no significant engagement or any engagement at all before whatever took place to get that arranged Saturday night, and I think that was late. And they had that game Saturday, and Eli made it clear that he was trying to, keep everything in the hands of his agent or whoever's doing the work. I guess his agent is his agent Jimmy Sexton. I don't know that.
Well, I
believe so.
We'll have to look that up, and I don't mean to misspeak. I just do. But it sounded as if there had been no reason for him to think he was really a contender until the contact that led to Saturday night's specific contact. Now, I don't know if that could have occurred in some way Friday with a go-between, or if it was all, hey, we're going to be in town. Do you mind not going to your daughter's performance of the Nutcracker and meeting up with us? So, to Souichi's point, amazingly compressed time frame on what happened to land him in the end. To
the extent that I don't think he was even on the radar screen until 48 hours before the Sun Belt Conference Championship game.
Well, he was on Blair Kerkhoff's radar screen when you did the first
Hell yeah,
list.
he was.
Yeah,
potential candidates.
Yeah, as a potential candidate, you know how that goes. You as soon as within a couple hours after Odom was fired, you put together a list of people who you think might be interested, might that Missouri would have a chance to get. It didn't include Urban Meyer, for instance.
Some Mizzou fans wanted that, of course.
Yeah, but look, I had heard. I actually thought he was going to be a strong candidate at Arkansas, and for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
He's from Norman, Oklahoma originally, but grew up in Arkansas. Went to Arkansas Tech, coached at Arkansas State, Springdale High under Gus Malzahn. There's a much stronger Arkansas connection. And one thing I did hear today is that Arkansas would love to have had him, and that didn't work out. And I don't know the extent of the contact between Arkansas and Drinkwitz, but they were really interested.
To that point, I mean, after the Sun Belt title game, when Eli was being asked these questions, I don't want to say his last name yet, but he was asked specifically about the Arkansas opening, which I thought was interesting because nobody was asking him about the Missouri opening yet. And then all of a sudden, Missouri kind of swoops in, and then all of a sudden, Arkansas has a new head coach, and Sam Pittman from Georgia. So everything moved kind of fast. I think all indications pointed that Eli was headed to Arkansas, and then all of a sudden, like I said, Missouri kind of swept in there.
It'd be interesting. I don't know if we'll have the chance to do this, but I suspect we would like to try to keep reporting on this to get a real lasered-in diagnosis of 24 hours that changed the whole search.
Sort of the TikTok of the
and I can't remember if we've said this on here or just discussed among ourselves, but sort of starting with a reset on Friday when it was either then that it became public or then that it already happened that the curators had one way or another differed with what they thought Missouri ought to be doing in the form of what Jim Sterk was presenting to them.
Which kind of surprised me. I asked Jim today about the index card we think all athletic directors have with a list of potential candidates on there that they always keep with them, and he sort of danced around the answer a little bit, but he said sure they know and they work in concert with with agents, with search firms, but I did get a sense that the fact that that Drinkwitz came in so late in the process that he just wasn't Missouri wasn't considering him in the days after firing Barry Odom.
At one point in the breakout, so after the formal, at the table part of the press conference, at one point in the breakout, Jim Sterk, gave a nod toward Nick Jost and said, basically gave Nick credit and I don't know Nick's exact title here at the athletics department.
Deputy Athletic Director of Communications,
Yeah.
I believe, but he's a deputy AD.
Yeah, and he's his influence is obviously, extended past those boundaries, but gave Nick credit for sort of
kind of identifying
being the first one on Eli. Second after Blair Kerkhoff.
All right. Hey, let's take a quick break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the type of job that Eliah Drinkwitz is walking into, and what the potential, what the upside is for Missouri football. I'll tell you what Souichi Terada wants to know. That's for sure. We'll be right back.
When it comes to saving you money on tires, nobody does it better than Big O Tires. Like saving you up to $120 on select sets of Goodyear, Yokohama, Pirelli, and Continental tires now through November 3rd. That's $70 off instantly, plus up to $50 back by mail-in rebate when you purchase using your Big O Tires card. Hurry into Big O Tires and see how much you can save. Big O Tires, the team you trust. For the location nearest you, go to bigotires.com.
We're back with Sam Mellinger, Vahe, Gregorian, and Souichi Terada. I'm Blair Kerkhoff, and we're talking about the Missouri football coaching introductory press conference where Eliah Drinkwitz was unveiled to the public. I love these things. Missouri does them well. We've been here for a few of them, right? It's the cheerleaders, it's the pep band, it's the alumni, it's family, it's friends. They make a big deal out of this.
They do, but it was a little funny start because it almost appeared that Eli had taken a wrong turn trying to come into the press conference.
Yeah.
The camera picked him up. Yeah. All those forces were in there, Blair. And you're kind of thinking, well, right now we should be walking in. And then the camera's got him out on the field. And he's kind of looking around, and people are sort of guiding him. I think a cameraman
had to point him in the right direction.
People were kind of running in the background. It just seemed a little off timing. Like we were here for a football game not long ago, or maybe it was somewhere else where the flyover came in like 30 seconds early, like during the middle of the anthem. It had a little that just not quite synced up feeling. But the other part that did strike me early, it was a little flat early. Mm-hmm. I thought it wasn't a great rousing hand for him. I think it was polite applause early. Mm-hmm. It's kind of funny at these things though, because we've got a mixture of those of us in the press. It was a pretty big contingent today from all over the state. And a fair amount of fans. The moment that I thought really fell flat was unfortunate when I can't remember if it was President Moon Choi or Chancellor Alexander Cartwright I think it was Moon Choi, was trying to get the players to applaud for him. Like, and here's our coach. And players, what do you think? I think they weren't ready for it. Right. And I think there was kind of like
they were kind of not in the distance, but off to one side.
Yeah. And then fans jumped in and kind of, picked them up.
I also thought, since we're breaking down the room, that having the pep band all the way over on one side kind of got lost a little bit. You had to have them in the middle somewhere, middle front or middle back. It just was almost echoey in there with it.
Yeah, the feng shui was a little off, right? That said,
so advice to Missouri, memo to Mizzou, don't do this again for another 10, 12 years. And speaking of 10, 12 years, even longer, Gary Pinkel was there today.
Yep.
And I thought it was symbolic that Moon Choi actually grabbed him and told him to go sit up front because he was just trying to blend in the back.
Yeah.
And I just thought, well, how symbolic is this? Here's your standard for Missouri football, sitting in the front. Eli, this is what we want Mizzou to be, and not the beginning of Gary Pinkel, not the last year, but those 8 years in the middle where they won double-digit games in 5 of the 8 years, appeared in 4 conference championship games, 2 in the Big 12 and 2 in the SEC. So to me, the question is it possible to regain that? Can Missouri be that?
I mean, they can because it hasn't been that long, right? But I think
how soon can it be?
I think it's a difficult job. The Mizzou football coach right now, I think whoever took that job, it is a difficult thing to succeed with. I mean, they just fired an alum, a true son that won enough. I don't know if can we say qualified for a bowl? Won enough games to qualify for a bowl.
For the third time in 4 years, by the way.
Third straight.
Yep, 3 years in a row. So. you're in the SEC. You are, I don't know exactly, but they're certainly bottom half in the SEC in terms of revenue, for the program. It's a difficult. I think it's a difficult job to succeed with. That said, he is exactly the kind of coach that I think can succeed here. Young, innovative, offense, energetic, full of ideas and execution. Like he's exactly. I was thinking of the guy, and we talked about this on this fine podcast program before. That Joe Brady was sort of that profile of the kind of coach that I thought might be able to work here. Well, Eliah Drinkwitz is basically that profile. He's just the head coach of a smaller Division I or FBS program, and Joe Brady is the assistant at probably the number one program right now.
Right.
So I love the profile, but it is a difficult job for sure.
Listen, he's 36.
Yeah.
And 1 year of head coaching experience.
He is young.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to
Souichi.
who proudly proclaimed a couple days ago that he's been here longer than coach.
I am very proud of that. I bet, though, with all the PR stuff, and we mentioned this before with the Mizzou and everything, he probably knows a little bit more about Missouri already than me. But it's slowly coming to me. But yeah, I think the big thing here is that it's going to be weird watching that offense next year because for the 2 months that I've been here, I listened to Barry Odom speak a lot about these very kind of archaic offensive principles, right, in terms of establishing the run, execution, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now you're bringing in a guy who is, quarterback centric, blah, 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 no huddle offense. They're going to go spread a lot. It's going to be a huge transition, I think, just with the personnel and everything. I mean, that's the type of offense you kind of have to recruit your own guys. I think defensively, we don't know yet who's going to be the coordinator, but that'll probably likely stay the same, especially with the success. But offensively, this is going to be a huge transition next year. Hopefully for the better. I mean, I watched some bad Missouri football games. That shutout out of Georgia was rough, so here we are.
Yeah, you got here just in time for for Missouri. You did see a victory right at the end.
Yes, at Little Rock, Arkansas.
Yeah.
Which I drove there on Thanksgiving, and my parents were very confused about that. But it's the gig.
Has not seen a victory good enough for the coach to not be fired.
Yeah.
That'll come next year.
Yeah.
What do you think, Vahe? Is this a program that can get to Pinkelish, the Pinkel level?
I think we've kind of talked about a few times again in this fine podcast we produce that you run, Blair, is the notion of this being what's the baseline for this program within the context of the SEC, and so you hope the baseline is semi-perennial 7-5, 8-4ish with a chance to peak. What we don't really know in a long-term setting way in the SEC is that chance to peak part. Because you could make a case that the 13 and 14 teams were still vestiges of the Big 12, where they had grown to a certain level through the Big 12 as opposed to sprouting up through the SEC. So that's the part that we can't really have a vision of. But as Eli said today, I mean, it has shown you that the path has been there. I think that the jury's out on that, and thus the jury's also out on the question of what will feel right to the Missouri fan, what will feel right to the people who decide to keep them in jobs or not. I mean, certainly Jim Sterk will be more invested in the long-term success of Eli than he was in Barry. I'm certainly not implying that he, didn't support Barry, didn't help Barry, but I don't know that he was passionate about this has got to work for Barry. He's my guy.
For sure. No, that's when you're working for a guy that didn't hire you. I think that's the prevailing attitude.
Yeah.
I liked what I heard about him. He seems to understand the recruiting geography. Right. Talked about Texas, and that's important. When Missouri was building in the Big 12 under Gary, they were snagging guys out of Texas. Now, look, they could always tell these recruits that we're going to play in Texas twice a year or so. They don't have that anymore in the SEC. But I do think Texas should remain an important recruiting base for Mizzou. Of course, I don't know how many press conferences I've been here over the years listening to coaches talking about, locking down the state. That's standard stuff.
At least you said it.
You did say it. Didn't dismiss it.
Didn't dis-
we
don't-
don't need the Kansas City.
We don't think we
St.
need
Louis
anything
kid.
out of here at all. What's interesting also about Gary's recruiting, though, this sort of remained a signature of Gary's recruiting, even when they were getting the Dorial Green Beckham or the Blaine Gabbert, who was highly recruited. Those were
Springfield and St. Louis.
Those were guys they were a little bit out of the scope of what Missouri was winning with. I mean, they were winning with the 2- and 3-star guy they really thought and knew they could develop. They were winning with the Texas reject like Chase Daniel.
Sean Witherspoon.
And Sean Witherspoon's the guy who really comes to mind. He's sort of the very profile of that. What I can't remember with Sean is where he was. What are the places he got offered scholarships to? But I think they were late and not quite.
I just remember
might have expected.
he was a two-star kid.
Yeah.
That Texas or none of the Big 12 schools in Texas recruited.
Yeah. So development's part of the deal too, and you get the feeling he'll be able to make for a charismatic presence in a room, and I guess we're going to learn a little bit about that just in the next few days with the early recruiting deadline upon us.
Yeah, that's December 18th through the 20th, so that'll be another whole press conference where Eli will have to win again. Especially, and he mentioned this too, that it is very much like speed dating at this point, because he's going to have a few Missouri recruits or commits as of now, and some who have decommitted have said that they're going on an official visit this weekend. So that'll be huge for Missouri in terms of being able to have guys. I think before Barry was fired, they had 18 guys. I think that's down to around 13 to 14.
Yeah, 13 or 14.
If they can get it up to maybe 17 to 18, grab those 4 stars who may be decommitted, that'll be a big step in showing what Eli can do. But we just don't know yet. He's only had 1 year of head coaching experience.
He got specific with one of the numbers on the recruiting sanctions. I mean, he made a point of calling it 81 scholarships
For next season.
So they'll be down 4 next year is how I heard that. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, so I believe it was whatever the percentage was. It was 4.25, so that probably rounds down to 81. Yep.
So there has been some activity on social media with commitments. Some saying they're reopening their recruiting. Others have said they've kind of recommitted to Mizzou. Where does that stand with how many have decommitted, or do you know what the number is?
I thought it was 4 that you last wrote. Or?
Yeah, so it's a weird thing because some are technically committed, but they're exploring other options, which is not technically a decommitment, but at the same time you're essentially
dating other people till they get married.
It's an understanding. We have an understanding.
It's funny too because on Twitter you can check who they followed last, so you'll see some of these recruits are following, coaches from Big 10, Big 12, and you're just kind of like, okay, what's going on here? I see what you're doing. So I can't. It'll be difficult to nail down a specific number, but I believe it's around 4 to 5 decommitments.
Okay.
And then who knows? Some of them are coming back on an official visit. It's kind of a weird time though because it's essentially the last weekend before they can sign. So I'm sure other commits who decommitted maybe are going somewhere else. So there's a lot to juggle there. Obviously there is the other signing period later on, but that's February, first week of February. So there's some time, but this upcoming one on December 18th will be huge, long-term and short-term, really.
Have we? I know it's only been a couple hours, really, but any way to gauge what the Missouri fan feels about all this, or what?
I do my fun little Twitter gifs, however you call them. I still don't know.
We're depending on you for the correct pronunciation.
Yeah.
I say GIF, but I've also been yelled at. I've been yelled at by 14-years that are even younger than they're like a generation younger than me. So.
You are so passe.
Oh,
these days. I know. Those young punks.
That's my thing with Snapchat. My younger brother uses that. I don't anymore. So, but back to the Twitter GIFs thing. I like to gauge the reactions of Mizzou fans, and I think it was around a good 3/4 were positive. I'd say a lot of them were maybe a very small portion of it was negative, and then some of it was just we don't know at this point, which is I think fair. But I think compared to the names that were kind of leaked out last Thursday, this is a huge step up in terms of not actually knowing, because if you hire a Blake Anderson or a Skip Holter or whoever was on that name, you're winning 7 to 8 games, maybe not even have that peak because you already know who they are. But Eli the trajectory of the program can kind of go anywhere, so it is kind of still up in the air.
It's kind of funny you say that. You just made me have this thought. How much different would Eli's name be in all this if those other names hadn't been floated out last week? Maybe there was a certain genius in the other names. Yeah. I mean, I'm joking, but I'm not really. I mean, it's kind of I think the perception of him changed when that looked like the sort of the core of the search.
That's a hell of a point. I like that
You know,
point.
it's
That's PR 101, essentially. I took one PR class.
so it's and all this.
And that's what I learned.
There you go. Well, you learned it. So all this criticism, maybe we're just all being played.
I do know this. A coach with 12 victories coming in here looks a lot better than a coach with with a 7-5 record.
The only knock is experience, right? The only knock is that he's been for a head coach for 1 year and not 6 or whatever. The only knock is that, no offense, Blair, but his 1 year was at
where? At where? Where was it?
I'll just say a Sunbelt school. And
Group of 5 school.
but like, I feel like football is getting younger in a lot of ways, and maybe I'm biased that the Chiefs hired a GM who was 38, 39 years old, and scouts are younger. I think that there's a case to be made, and I've heard football people say this, and they're NFL people, so take it for what you will, but that football is changing so fast that the relevant experience has shrunk from a generation or 20 years down to about 10. And anything beyond 10 years is kind of irrelevant experience, and you have to keep relearning. And so from that perspective, inexperience aside, maybe he has exactly the right experience. I think that there is some relevancy and usefulness in effectiveness in having a background as a high school coach. I think you can relate. I think that that's real. I think that being able to play a little bit differently offensively, can give a school a bottom half in money, kind of program, an edge that they wouldn't have if they went traditional. So from those points of view, I'm not a Missouri grad or whatever, but like I kind of like the hire in those ways. It's a big swing, it's a big swing, and we're people like us who write, like we want big swings. It's good for content, right? But even beyond that, I think that that's the kind of thing that Missouri should be doing.
It's funny. I hadn't thought really about it till today. Talked to some people today, but also in you articulating it just now. In a way, you don't necessarily superficially think of this as a big swing. I mean, it's a 36-year-old guy from Appalachian State with 1 year of head coaching experience. But the fact is, it is bold, right? And it's a statement that, you think you can get substance from that kind of sizzle, basically, and you think that it's offense driven, right? We often see the pendulum swing the other way. We got an offensive guy. I'd say he's probably a little more outgoing, not necessarily. I guess you can't really say necessarily yet whether he's more or less charismatic than Barry, but I think he has a little more immediate presence than Barry. That's probably fair to say. And so all that, I think it does make you feel like there's potentially something big in this guy, and maybe you feel less bad about big swing and a miss if it doesn't work out, right? You feel like you'd rather try this than the 52-year-old guy who's 7-5, and that's sort of what it's going to be.
You know what? Like here's another way to think about it. I think is that I think Barry Odom was fired as much because people couldn't see. You just talked about 7-5, 8-4 with a chance to peak, and I think he was fired because people could no longer see that peak as a possibility. And I think the initial, the Skip Holtz, leak or whatever, that was a whole bunch of names that people couldn't see peak. This guy, you can see peak. He may fail. He just may be overwhelmed by an SEC job, but you can imagine how this is going to work. You can see the path to a big peak, and I think that's more than anything. I think that's what Missouri needs right now.
Go ahead.
That kind of reminds me, just not to make comparisons here, but that kind of reminds me of PJ Fleck in terms of the peaks and everything, because he had a few transition years where they weren't that good, and then all of a sudden they're exploding their first 10-win season since like the 60s or whatever. Yeah. So I think that idea of a young coach is definitely one Missouri fans are excited about, but at the same time, if this goes the other way and this is super successful and he gets 3 straight 10-win seasons, then I think he's gone. Because this is, at the end of the day, yes, it's an SEC program, but it's still not a blue blood like a Bama or an LSU, where those are destination jobs. So if
I think we can worry about that when that happens.
It'd be a great problem for Missouri.
It would, but I don't disagree with you. But I think I'm reminded more of something that Blair said a few months ago. Blair, Sam, and I spoke at the Kansas City Public Library, and Blair made a point of saying that probably no fan base needs a national championship more than Missouri. And we are actually in the 75th anniversary of the baseball national championship.
50 years since the conference championship.
No, 75th, 65th. What? 1954.
54. So
46. That's not 65th. Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to date those guys. Norm, if you're listening.
Sorry, Norm.
Norm Stewart pitched a 13-hitter in that College World Series and got a W, I think, out
Twirled.
of it. Twirled, yeah. I can't believe I didn't say twirled. Which makes me realize I've used that story in front of you too many times. But this is on my mind also because this morning, speaking to the Plaza Club in Kansas City before we left to come here, they brought that up. And I think that goes back to the very point Sam was making. I mean, we might think that the hoped for norm, the regular sort of year would be a nice 7-5, 8-4 competitive. Maybe if you win a game you shouldn't. But really, the thing that excites anybody about this is there ever a possibility you could really do it? You know, is it that ridiculous to ask that you could have a chance? And I think you articulated this, Blair. Maybe that's what was lost with by the end with Barry. Maybe they were going to be steady. But this should have been that peak year.
It should have been with Kelly Bryant. This was going to be that year.
Schedule laid out the right way.
Yep,
enough veterans back.
The college football playoff quarterback was here. There seemed to be enough returning defensively that this could have been the year. It was going to be Missouri or Georgia, and by the time Missouri and Georgia played, it was awful for Mizzou. So. All right, guys, thanks for sticking around. And Sam Mellinger, Vahe Gregorian, and Souichi Terada. Really appreciate it, guys. Safe travels back to Kansas City. Except for you, Souichi.
I live here, 10 minutes away.
That'll do it for another episode of SportsBeat KC, the Star's daily sports podcast presented by Big O Tires. Thanks to producer Randy Mason for putting together today's show, and links to the coverage of the day at Mizzou can be found in the show notes and on kansascity.com. Hey, we love those rates and reviews. Where you can do that, please do it. It helps. We'll be back on Wednesday for another SportsBeat KC. Talk to you then.